I'm here today talking to Dr. Emma Stack. Hello, Emma.
Hi, Rachel.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm looking forward to chatting to you. Now, we've not met before. I know a little bit about you because I've been doing my research, but in preparation for this chat today. So if you don't mind, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your work for the people that haven't met you before?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, I'm not a physiotherapist. I used to be one. I qualified way back in '89 from St Mary's, and I was a physiotherapist clinically for about 4 years, I think, probably tops. And I was interested in geriatrics, so I specialised in that area. Then I left and did a master's degree, and after that, I was lucky enough to get a research job at the University of Southampton with Professor Anne Ashburn, who I'm sure most of the people watching this interview will have heard her name. And that was supposed to be a 2-year research post, as these things often are. And I've been here now just over 20 years doing research on Parkinson's disease, balance and falls. That's really become my thing. Did my PhD in it about, 15 years ago, something like that. And so I don't know a great deal about many things, but I know an awful lot about how people with Parkinson's turn around, which you might think is an almost entirely useless thing to be an expert in, but that's my thing. So I'm a full-time researcher. I'm a principal fellow here at Southampton now. That's what I do.
Parkinson's people and getting them to turn around is not useless.
No,
it's
that's
very
true.
important.
It's fascinating. I mean, it was during the first study when I was here, which was one of Anne's studies. I was just the research fellow on the job, and it was very interesting to us both when somebody said, turning is fatal. And you think, oh, that's interesting. Fatal is quite a strong word, isn't it? And so I think I've spent 20 years of my life now looking at why that might be, and that's led us into other directions at looking at the other activities that people find difficult, and led us to think that although you have all the risk factors for falling, you still don't fall over 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You fall over at a particular moment. And that's really what my research is about, finding out why people fall when they do and what you could do to prevent those little incidents when it all goes horribly wrong and they fall. Yeah? You'll always be the age you are. You'll always have the diagnosis you have. All your risk factors are not modifiable. But the way you move, the way you complete certain actions is modifiable. And I think that's very interesting because it has huge potential to be modified.
So what are the modifiers that you've found to help people or prevent people falling or sort of intervene in this instance?
I think my approach is to say that you have to adopt a strategy for moving that is appropriate to the condition you have, and it doesn't really matter what the condition you have. The theory is the same. You must modify. You must be realistic about the condition you have or the problems that you're facing and modify them. So I'm in many ways anti almost the whole idea of normal movement. If normal meant how I used to do something before this happened to me, I'm very Buddhist about it, if you like. It's being realistic about what's happening today. What am I facing today, and how today must I perform this activity? It may be different to how I did it for the last 60 years, and it might be a very difficult habit to break. But if you adopt a mental strategy that's appropriate to today and how you are and where you're at and what's causing the problem. So I think it's largely a mental thing. But as with absolutely everything, the physio in me will always say, the better condition your body's in, the more flexible and the stronger and the better balanced you are, great. But exercise by itself isn't going to keep anyone off the floor. It's the way you move with whatever condition you're facing.
So you're kind of not talking just about Parkinson's here, are you? You're talking about this in any neurological condition or any long-term condition?
Any condition that isn't going to go away. So I think it would apply as well with a short-term condition. You have to adapt. You probably need to move differently with a mobility condition that's short-term even. But certainly in the long-term conditions that you're going to have to learn to live with, I'm very pro people learning to live with, and that's the way you cope with a condition rather than you fight it, you take it on, you challenge it, you try to beat it. I don't like all that fighty talk. Live with it. It's not going away. And until somebody cures these conditions that we're talking about, and I'm out of a job, which would be great, you have to learn to live with it. And nobody's going to cure Parkinson's disease in any way, shape, or form, and certainly not in the short term. When you understand what the pathology is, that's always going to happen. But it's about finding ways to live with conditions and ways to optimize your chances of getting through the day from the time you get out of bed to the time you get back to bed at the end of the day still on your feet and still able to do what you want and to live to fight another day. That's how I see it.
So thinking about what you're saying, finding ways to optimize the condition, the long-term condition that you have or that your patients have, what are you looking for? How do you find those ways? How do you translate what you're saying into a sort of practical application for the clinician?
Right. I think the first thing to do is to say that it would sit well with all of us to be in as good physical condition as we can be in. So if you were thinking about, to use an analogy, if you were trying to walk across the other side of a mountain range, the first thing you want to do is be fit for that job that's ahead of you. And all of us could be fitter than we are, in some sense of the word. And I know if I was diagnosed tomorrow, I'd spend the first year of my life with Parkinson's trying to get much fitter than I've ever been. I would want to be as bendy and as strong and as well balanced. I'd be taking up the Tai Chi classes and I would do it tomorrow. I would do it. But then it's also about making sure that your condition is being managed by the experts in the condition. So again, to use the analogy, you wouldn't want your backpack to be any bigger than it needs to be. You wouldn't want to be burdened by a condition any more than you should. So good medical supervision, good therapy supervision to make sure that your burden is as reduced as it can be. And then it's about picking your route across the mountains, and that's where the strategies come in. So, you can either hack steps into the side of a mountain, or in fact, if a mountain is too high to climb, go round it. And so, I would often say to people who have difficulty turning, for example, then don't turn if you don't have to. Pick a route that gets you almost walking across a room rather than one that has a sharp 90-degree bend in it. If you can't turn left, take 3 right turns. You'll end up in the same place, yeah? So you get your body in nick, you get your doctors to make sure that your condition is being well managed. You get the therapists to work with you because they're experts in how you move and alternative strategies. And then you have to learn the skills to deploy them and to stop thinking in the way you have done for the last 60 years before you were injured or ill, and devolve new strategies constantly for your changing condition. And that's very mental. And although it sounds like the easiest thing to do, that's why people can't give up smoking, because getting your brain to suddenly think about doing something differently or stop doing what it wants to do, it's not easy. So I think it's predominantly about behavioural change and learning to live, your whole family and friends and you, living with the condition that's not going to go away, and just finding ways to make it as easy as possible.
And so it sounds like it's almost behavioural change, which is almost habit breaking, isn't it, and habit forming.
Absolutely. And that's very difficult to do. It's an extremely difficult thing to do, to change a skill that you've established in one way, isn't it? It's much easier to learn a skill from scratch. Even if you think about your golf swing, if you've got a terrible golf swing, you're a nightmare for the coach who's going to try and change it. Whereas if you've never picked up a club, he's laughing because he's going to teach you to do it properly. So all therapists encounter human beings who've learned to do a thing in a particular way, and then they've got to unlearn that and learn the new thing. It's not easy.
And how do you encourage the individual with the condition to make those habit changes? You talked about it being a mental thing. How do you make those changes? How do you as a clinician get those changes to happen in that person?
I think so I'm not a clinician anymore, so I talk to people who take part in my studies. I also talk to people living with the condition, largely people with Parkinson's and their carers, but I also do talk to a lot of clinicians, both from physiotherapy speciality and clinicians. And I think the important thing that we can do is to be a little bit more positive about the potential to live with these conditions. Even in the 20 or so years that I've been involved with Parkinson's disease, that has become a different diagnosis altogether. That the medication is much better now. The side effects are much less dreadful than they used to be. And when you talk to groups of people living with it, they say they don't get enough positivity and hear enough about that side of things. Take it on. It's not all about maintenance and trying to put off inevitable decline. When you're diagnosed with Parkinson's, you could be fitter than you've ever been in your life a year later, because at that point you're diagnosed, there's a tiny little part of your brain the size of a grain of rice that's got Parkinson's. Yep, leave it 5 years and don't do anything and don't move, then the rest of your body's going to look pretty awful as well. But if you tackle it head on and prevent those secondary deficits that come about from becoming sedentary or becoming afraid of falling before you need to be, then you can limit it, can't you? You can limit it to being a deficit in your brain that you can compensate for and you can get around, you can learn to live with, And as long as you keep a very flexible, open attitude to changing the way you've done things, then I think it's the way forward. I mean, the example I often use is people say, we always go to Waitrose on a Wednesday. And I think, okay, if you're feeling shattered Wednesday morning, be flexible enough to say it will wait till Thursday afternoon. And it sounds so trite, but people get into habits. And if you start trying to perform difficult tasks when you're fatigued, you're much more likely to fall over, and you're likely to be pooped for the rest of the week. So be flexible, get up, let meet the day head on. What can I do today? If it's a good day, do it. If it's a rubbish day, wait, put it off till tomorrow. Yeah?
Because that's when you're going to fall, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So that's one way to prevent falls. It's a good good thing. And listening to you explaining that, I think there are a lot of takeaways in there for the clinician to just take what you just said, to use those sort of that sort of communication, your message you just said, with the individual. So talking to them the messages that you've just told us, how they're really, really useful.
Yeah, I mean, the last paper that we wrote about falls in Parkinson's was headed "Slow Down and Concentrate," which might seem like a really simple thing to say, but in Parkinson's, okay, you're not going to get diagnosed unless you're bradykinetic in the first place. But even then, you have to slow down when you're doing something that is dangerous, or you know it's dangerous. You maybe have had a near miss before, or you're afraid of falling. Slow down a little bit more. Don't do anything else at the same time. So while you're getting out of the car, crossing the car park and going into a friend's house, whatever, do it quietly. Don't talk to the person walking beside you. Don't be thinking about a whole load of other stuff. Let the thinking wait until you're safely inside. Learn to just do one thing slowly, concentrate on it, use your cortex, let your basal ganglia, who aren't helping you, just forget them. Use your cortex, concentrate, single-mindedly, get yourself safely from A to B, and then have a wonderful chat when you get there. Just don't try and do the two things at the same time.
It sounds like the way you're talking, it sounds like mindfulness is really key in this.
I'm really into mindfulness and the whole concept of that, because I think so often we try to do two things at the same time, and we often have to, but you don't have to always be doing two things at the same time. So I speak to groups of people who say, I despair of my husband, he's got Parkinson, I send him down to the garage to collect 3 things for me, and he comes back with only one of them. And I advocate that people stop doing that immediately. Write the 3 things down, stick it in his shirt pocket. Don't let his brain be busy trying to remember the 3 things you said. Just let him walk, concentrate on his balance, get safely to A to B. When he gets to the garage, she wants this, this, and this out of the freezer, bring them back. Don't try to remember a phone message that you took while your partner was out. If you've got Parkinson's, forget it. Write it down, forget about it. You need to devote your cortex and your concentration to when you're up and you're at risk of falling. So damp it right down, one thing at a time, and pay attention to the fatigue. It is the other thing that I absolutely bang on about, because we also constantly hear the message that exercise and activity is essential, and exercise is the way forward. We don't do enough. If we don't use it, we lose it. No, you need to rest and relax and take notice of fatigue. A little 15-minute break might just make your gait so much better when you stand up again. And if that's what keeps you off the floor that day and stops your femur getting a whack on the floor, do it.
Mm.
Do it.
And I know your work's all been in Parkinson's, and you're talking Parkinson's, but this is the same for anyone across any, just to reiterate, isn't it, across any long-term or neurological condition?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the same. And in fact, for anybody who doesn't have a long-term neurological condition, it goes further than that, doesn't it? I read a really interesting paper, and I often talk about it to groups of people, clinicians as well, that says performance at any given moment in any task is a combination of how fit you are and how fatigued you are. And that's like you and me having this interview now. So if you've been up all night doing I don't know what, we'd be having a rubbish chat. This would be awful, and you'd be off beat, and it'd be a disaster. So it's how well trained you are to do what you're doing right now, and how ready you are to do it. And that means constantly attending to your fatigue levels. Not pushing. If you've got a neurological condition, don't push and think, oh, I must do it, because if I give in, I'm going to get worse. No, you're not. Give in. Sit down for half an hour. Don't do anything now. Recover a little bit. Most tasks will wait till tomorrow, or this afternoon. Treat yourself a little bit more like an Olympic athlete who doesn't train until the big event. They train and then they rest, they taper, they prepare. So as I often talk about with my participants in studies, and again, it would go much wider than Parkinson's, If you've got the grandchildren coming at the weekend and that's a big exhausting event for you, then don't do anything crazy on Thursday, Friday. Have the house ready, have your shopping done, rest for a couple of days, and then don't try to put the house right on Monday morning. Leave it. And it's applying that sort of strategy to living with a complex condition that has a big element of fatigue in it. Just treat yourself like an athlete. Train when you can, but when you need to, taper down, pay attention to the fatigue, and don't. There's very few things in life we have to do in a hurry if we really think about it.
It's really, really interesting that you use the analogy of athletic training, of an Olympic athlete or a professional athlete. I've never thought about it that way before, but that's exactly what people need to do, isn't it? Any injured person needs to.
Absolutely. If you think about how a boxer trains as well, they spend most of their professional boxer, it spends a good portion of their day training, a good portion eating steak, and a good proportion asleep. And their day is often train, eat, sleep, train, eat, sleep. And I think the whole media pushes all of us towards thinking exercise is essential. And there's a whole industry around exercise and activity. We don't have so much from the mindfulness people saying sometimes just rest, relax, recoup. And also there's some evidence to show that you need a certain number of days. We know about it physiologically. You need a certain number of days to benefit from exercise. Exercise doesn't make you stronger. Recovery from exercise makes you stronger. But how often do we say that to patients? That there's no point in overdoing it because your brain doesn't have time to learn what you were learning with the therapist, and your body doesn't have time to compensate and grow stronger. So don't overdo it. Slow it down a little bit and see if you make gains faster by incorporating appropriate rest and activity.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I like that concept. I really do. So we need to think about it. Has any research been done on that? Do you know?
Not enough, I think. So when we published the paper Slow Down and Concentrate, you got a very mixed message from some of the first therapists who heard me talk about it, in that some of them didn't take to it too well, to say, don't overdo it. Exercise is not going to save your life. Sometimes sitting down for half an hour when you feel tired might be the right thing to do. Because I think as therapists, we come from that background of thinking all movement is good, exercise is good, activity is good. Yes, it is, but the research that's lacking, as you just mentioned, is the research that says what happens to somebody with Parkinson's, for example, after an intense period of exercise activity. Do their gait parameters, does their postural stability deteriorate when they're fatigued? If it does, then we're doing them a disservice to say exercise, because we may be putting their risk of falling up if we don't then say afterwards, you rest and recover. I mean, we did a study where we interviewed people about their leisure participation, and often they would say, after exercise, I feel completely shattered for the rest of the day and I can do nothing else. Now, that's, you and I know that's not how exercise should feel. That's not how it feels to you and me. We might be exhausted after we've been to the gym for half an hour. By the time you've had a shower and walked out, you feel better. So if you've got somebody with a neuro condition who says, I now feel worse, that's my energy gone for the day, nothing else can happen, then that's not right. That's not good exercise, and we've done something wrong. So unless we are monitoring patients and helping them to understand that, many of them are going to go out there and overdo it, and there hasn't been the research on what constitutes over-exercising in neurological conditions. It's not the same as for somebody without one.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're not dispelling the fact that we need to exercise and do physical activity.
Absolutely.
It's just balancing out the fatigue. You advocate physical activity,
Definitely.
but we need to include in there, which we often don't think about, the fatigue element and mindfulness too. Because if you're continuing your physical activity when you are tired or not thinking about it, you're not going to perform as well either, are you? And your training elements won't be as.
That's absolutely right. It may become entirely pointless in terms of what you thought you'd gain, but all you have done is get a side effect. You've put yourself at greater risk of falling because you're now more tired, or you, as you say, you weren't concentrating, you're more at risk, or your quality of the rest of the day is rubbish because you've used your finite quota of energy for the day on doing exercise you believe to be helpful that actually was counterproductive. And I think perhaps one of the reasons why Tai Chi is such a good exercise mode for people like people with Parkinson's, but it would apply in other conditions as well, is the first thing they do is to get you to relax, to allow movement to happen. So in the condition that I'm most interested in Parkinson's, you've got this raised background tone throughout their body, and then we just try to get them to move, It's difficult, and it may actually be dangerous. What you need to do is relax and then allow movement to happen more easily. It won't be as energy demanding. It will be more comfortable. You're not going to pull this, strain this, what have you. So things like Tai Chi and swimming might be so enjoyable because they actually get people to relax before you move. And I think relaxation hasn't been adequately explored by therapy researchers, and simple rest and relaxation. We need to look at those more. There's tons of literature on exercise.
Yes, yeah. And I guess so relaxation and rest will relate to tone as well.
Absolutely, because I totally agree with that. People with Parkinson's have the sort of increased tone that you or I would have if we tried to conduct this interview while we were standing on our chairs. So our tone is going to go up in our lower limbs, in our trunk, but ours will go down again when we sit down. We'll relax. We're sitting here. We've got quite low tone. They're living with that high tone all day long. So not only is movement difficult for them, but they're likely to be more exhausted because they're simply using more energy to sit down than you or I are. Their muscle tone is greater. If you superimpose on that any additional movements, tremors, dyskinesias, anything else, look at what they're doing all day. Even when they think they're at rest, they're using energy in a way that we're not right now. So I think it's an area that needs to be explored, and it's not just physically relaxing. I think we need to think about people's minds as well, because they're using so many strategies and compensation strategies up here to cope with the damage that, again, you and I don't have to do. It all happens easily for you and me. So mentally and physically, they are tired. And I think we often bang on too much about more activity, more exercise, and we don't remember that when you're tired, that's a great big clue that we need to calm down, slow down.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. It's nice to hear that you talking about that other side of the coin, really. Because, yes, people do talk a lot about physical activity. And so it's really nice to think about these other things and how important it is. And I guess, and I guess communicating that to the patient is important as well.
It goes down well. It goes down very well when I talk to groups of carers who say, I've been horrible to him. All he does is he falls asleep in the chair, and I'm on at him constantly about how tired he is and he ought to get up and do something. And now you tell me his muscle tone is through the roof and he's compensating for his basal ganglia problem by thinking his way through movements. Suddenly I feel, what have I been doing? Yeah, I'm going to let him rest when he needs a rest, and I'm going to take a rest as well. And I think a lot of carers are scared that somebody sitting in a chair is going to turn chair-shaped in the next 10 minutes and not be able to move. So it's exactly what you said about, I'm not anti-physical activity and exercise. I do it myself. We should all probably do it more. But it's about doing it right, balancing it with rest periods afterwards to allow the good gains to happen and not to overdo it. An overtrained elite athlete is rubbish too. They don't get anywhere. They're going to get injured and they're going to be out of the competition. It's exactly the same with patients with long-term conditions. We've got to balance this up and make sure that they get good, healthy rest and relaxation in equal measure with good, healthy exercise and activity.
And I think you made a really good point there about it not just being about communicating with the patient or the individual with a neurological condition. It's about communicating with the carers as well, isn't it? Because they're the people that have such an impact, because as therapists we're not with the patient every day or for very long at all, so the carers need to take over our role. So it's really important that they're educated in all of this, isn't it?
And they live with the condition 24 hours a day as much as the person that that they love and they live with, and they are, out of all the right motivations, they're trying to do the right thing constantly, and we miss a trick if we don't spend a lot of time explaining things to them in ways they can understand. I mean, the other classic one from my work is I'm saying slow down and concentrate to the person, saying get out of the car, don't think about anything else, just get to the next safe point. I spend as much time saying to the carer, hold the conversation. I'm a therapist by background. We talk all the time. Actually, all you're doing is it's in their ears. They can't avoid hearing it if you're constantly talking at them. So sometimes we need to not speak during a complex activity like a transfer or getting in and out of a car is a good one. We've got to learn to just hold that conversation until we're safely through the door and then have it. And the carers think, oh, okay, that's not easy. That's a habit to break. I normally whitter in his ear while we're walking down the street. Don't now. Let him be Parkinson's. Let him concentrate on getting down the street. And then when you're there, talk then. The men love it. They say, "Oh yeah, you shut my up after many years. This is good. We like this."
Yes, tell her to shut up more. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, good. Really interesting tips there for communication, rest, relaxation to encourage a better performance. Really,
Yes,
isn't it?
absolutely.
Yeah. So I know in our communications before we came into this interview, you talked about a lot about your interests in balance. You mentioned as well balance and mobility. Is your thoughts around balance and mobility the same as what we've just been talking about?
Yes, I think, I mean, in a nutshell, I think that you have a number of risk factors that are there every day of your life and are not going to be changeable. And they are, so for example, you and I are more at risk of falling than men are, and there's nothing we can do about that. Old people are more at risk, people with a neurological condition are more at risk, nothing we can do about that. But we still don't see people who are old women with neuro conditions falling over 24 hours a day. It's when your balance and mobility comes up against a particular activity that overwhelms it and that you've not worked out how to tackle safely, that's when you fall over. So I think my feeling about balance and mobility is there's probably a lot we could do to stop people falling over much quicker, much more short term than working on things like your balance, your strength, your flexibility. Those things are going to take months. But what is instant is learning a new strategy for getting through a difficult task, like a transfer or a turn or descending the stairs. If you can teach somebody to do those things in a different way, albeit not normal, it's compensating, it's not quite how we did it when we were 18, whatever, that's fine. Teach them to do that and it's instant. Work on their balance and strength to make them move differently, and okay, but it'll take you 6 months. So my take is, here first, body second.
And the skill, I guess, from the clinician's point of view, is identifying the strategy that helps that person get through that difficulty.
Yes, it is. And then when I think a clinician's best skills are in their interviewing skills. So it's about asking the best questions and being quiet for long enough to really hear the information that's being given back to you from your patient or anybody else who has observed the patient, normally a carer, but maybe another professional. So before you have to deploy your therapy brain and look at how someone moves, spend far longer talking to them about the situations in which they have nearly fallen or actually fallen, or that they fear they're going to fall in future. I know when I was training, I can remember an excellent senior physio in outpatients. I hadn't a clue what I was doing in outpatients, didn't understand a thing. But she would say, when you take a history of someone's back pain, you should almost be able to feel it by the end of the examination. You know where it is, what it's like, and what makes it worse. And I would say the same thing if you're taking a fall history. Before you even stand that person up or look at them in a dodgy situation where they're at risk of falling, talk to them and listen to them. Ask them where they've fallen in the past, what they were doing or trying to do, why they think they fell on the floor, and then what happened afterwards. And those 4 things about each fall will give you so much information to stop you just treating somebody as a faller. They will tell you exactly what you need to do with that person. So if the answer is I don't know, that tells you a whole heap. First of all, get them to a doctor, because perhaps they collapsed, perhaps they've passed out, they've blacked out, it's medical, it's not you. Or if they say I don't know, that tells you as a therapist that maybe this person is not somebody you're going to work with on a high cognitive level. You need to think about strategies for preventing broken bones when they do fall. So where were they, what were they doing, why they think they fell, and what happened next will give you everything you need to steer your further analysis and intervention in the specific and right direction. So good therapists ask the best questions and listen best.
And I guess, sometimes we're limited by time, which is unfortunate, but sometimes we are. So I guess sometimes your treatment session might just consist of talking and assessment instead of actually doing anything.
Yeah, there's been a paper was published, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, that said physiotherapists are very good at predicting who's going to fall, first of all. So you're going to have a good idea if you have a good conversation. But also there's been work to show that people who reflect on a fall, talk about a previous fall, are significantly less likely to fall again in that situation. So even reflecting on a fall history is in many ways an intervention. So it might appear you've spent a long time on assessment, but that reflection about why do you think you fell there, that might be all a person needs to work out what happened. Yeah, maybe I was tired, or I was trying to move too quickly, or I'd got something in my hand and I didn't have a hand free, or I can't do this. I just find that a difficult movement. All those conversational points are an intervention in themselves. So spending more time taking a history, I would always advocate before you start moving somebody around. And it also cuts down the amount of time you spend observing somebody, because if you've been able to pinpoint from their history what is the rogue activity, what's the one that's the problem for this person, then watch them do that in a functional way, and go straight to that. That's what you need to look at with your therapy eyes once you've already got it, in your head through conversation.
Yeah, brilliant. And then, so moving on, I feel like that's come to a close. I didn't have any other questions on that then, but what I do want to ask you about is the research that you published in February this year, which is moving on to a technology side of things. So about sensors in homes about people falling. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that whilst we're on the conversation of fall?
Yeah, it's really a neat follow-on from the last question you asked about how you get this information about the circumstances in which your patients are falling. Because at the moment, we're reliant on, at best, somebody reporting, recounting what they can remember about a fall to you. If we were able to remotely observe what happens with our frequent fallers, in fact, to observe the moment at which they fell, this could revolutionize what a therapist is dealing with in terms of good information that you've got before you try to intervene. So at the moment, the best we can do is talk to a patient. If you're lucky, you might have a patient who's used a falls diary or something, who comes to their assessment with you and says, actually, since I last saw you, I fell over here. But what would be even better as a therapist is to be able to look at your patient falling over. Never been done before, really. Routinely, a clinical therapist doesn't get to look at their patient falling over and make their own deductions about it. So I'm working on a huge project at the moment, of which University of Southampton is one of three collaborators. It's led by the University of Bristol in collaboration with Southampton and Reading. It's called Sphere, which stands for the Sensor Platform for Healthcare in a Residential Environment. And it brings together computer scientists, engineers, and clinicians looking at how we can use a huge battery of sensors of all kinds in a person's own home to tell us a lot more about their health, in that every time they deviate from what's normal or what's habitual for them, those deviations could be flagged up and the appropriate clinical assessor gets that information. So, for example, with somebody who's at risk of falling, we would have a lot of information about the environment in which they live. We would use a variety of sensors that tell us how often they move, where they move, and how they move. And most importantly, what we're trying to do at Southampton is establish whether you can tell somebody's risk of falling is increasing, rather than just, oops, they're on the floor again, which is what a lot of sensors can do at the moment. There are lots of people all over the world publishing falls identification type work, where they've used either a pressure mat or a video-based type system, Connect cameras, for example, even a body-worn activity monitor that says, yes, we can see a big lump lying on the floor. The lump hasn't moved for a long time. This must be a person fallen over. So that's happened. But wouldn't you rather, as a clinician, get an alarm that said, this patient is having more and more near misses? The sensors that they're wearing or the sensors in their home are suggesting they're not moving as much as they had been last month. Their postural stability is waning. We're seeing more wobble. We're seeing more trips. If we could have a technology that alerted us ahead of the game, then that's the time to intervene. And as a payoff, it might also have captured the exact moment at which somebody fell and tell us more than we could ever guess, because we only ever at the moment guess from what our patients tell us what happens when somebody falls. And most of the research that we rely on is based on people pretending to fall over in labs. So there's lots of monitors that have been designed to identify that a fall has happened. And that's based on a healthy 18-year-old, 21-year-old pretending to fall over in a gait lab. That probably bears almost no resemblance to what happens when a person of our age or older falls over for real. So we're trying to use sensors to capture a real picture of what happens, and that a clinician, like a therapist, might be able to review, see a fall in real time, and then from the environmental sensors know what was going on. Had that person had a busy day? Was the light level low in the house? Whatever, the whole picture. It's a very complicated study. We are a tiny part of it here at Southampton. But if it were to work, it would revolutionise the information a clinician has when they get to assess somebody who's fallen. You'll get to see it. You will see the fall.
I I think it will happen. Technology will enable us to do this. If you think about homes 5 years ago, we didn't. Not many of us probably have these now, but automatic turning the lights on and off, and
Yes.
turning the dishwasher on when you're out at work, and and shutting the
Yeah.
curtains with automatically at a certain time. All those sorts of things are coming into the homes now, and so I don't see why these sensor things aren't going to be available to us at some point. Have you got a home set up with the sensors in?
What they're going to do, the next sort of stage in the study is to have, so we've got one house in Bristol that's been kitted out with absolutely everything. I think there are something like 60 types of different sensor there, from the environmental right down to on the person who's in the house. But that's virtually a living lab. That's a fake house, if you like, just a little terrace house in Bristol. The next step is to try to install the technology in up to 100 homes in Bristol, predominantly in Bristol, 100 different types of family, because you don't, the sensors need to be able to identify in a home with multiple occupants who's who and what's going on. So there's a lot of testing to be done before this would go into operation and could be useful in the home of somebody with a condition. So at the moment, we just take sensors out for our studies and use them temporarily in someone's home, put them away. But I think it's not going to be the technical challenge so much as deciding what to do with the information. Because you're right, we have sensors of all kinds in our world, and we have video cameras are watching us in the street. We have a sensor that will turn your lights on if it starts to get dark in the back garden. So the technology in itself is not a problem. But deciding how to power those sensors so that it doesn't cost the earth, deciding how much information of what kind gets out there, make sure it doesn't go to the wrong people. You don't need every burglar down your street knowing your house is empty at the moment. Deciding whether a clinician wants that information at all, or whether your GP doesn't want to come in the morning and go, oh, you're getting wobbly, aren't you? I can't deal with that. I'll wait till you've fallen over. Or deciding whether the information simply should go to the person themselves to inform their own self-management, or perhaps to the daughter who lives 10 miles away that says, your dad isn't out of bed yet this morning, or he did get out of bed, but he got out of bed an hour later than he normally does. Do you want to give him a call and see? So in many ways, it's the person aspects of that kind of technology that will be more challenging than the sensors themselves. Who wants it? And what will they do with that information? It is a very, very big research question.
Yeah, because I'm thinking as well how you could extend this project, because you can get now, can't you, little vital statistic stickers that you can stick onto individuals, so you can also be recording their vital. You might have that in the study as well. I don't know. They
are measuring all sorts of things. Yeah, I mean, so our aspect is because of the work here on Parkinson's and stroke, really, that Anne Ashburn's been known for. So we came into it from the full side, but they're working with people who are interested in things like cough. You could monitor cough in people with asthma and a range of other respiratory conditions. You could look at people with addictive problems and look at their behaviours. You could look at, I mean, there are mood recognition technologies that could be embedded in your mirror. You know, brush your hair in the morning, tell you how depressed you are and whether you're on the, You could measure how quickly someone drinks a pint. You can look at all sorts of hormones being exuded through the skin. You can monitor a human being in all sorts of ways now for a whole range of conditions. But whether you want to be or whether the person wants to be is a different issue altogether. So it's interesting being involved in a project like that that's very computery, very engineering from the clinical side, because you have to keep saying, well, hold on. You know, these aren't lab rats, these are human beings, and this is going to be whole families. Is this technology appropriate? And just because we can do it, should we do it?
Yeah. Interesting. I like the sound of this study. I want to follow this study, so it'd be good to hear.
Keep thinking sphere. Listen out.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that's really exciting. Just I haven't heard of any other studies that doing that sort of thing, measuring so much using technology like that from physiotherapy anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And it extends what we do with technology from us using technology in very simple ways, because a lot of the technology you do read about that therapists are adopting is in many ways a bit of a glorified stopwatch. You know, you can put a sensor on someone to time how quickly they do the timed up and go test, but actually you could have done that with a stopwatch and you could have counted the steps. So it takes technology beyond just counting simple parameters to actually giving us a much more global and holistic view of how somebody functions and what goes wrong. And it should give us the chance to intervene far more timely than we are able to at the moment. We normally come in after an event when the technology has just simply been a call button around their neck that says, yep, fallen over, broken a bone, help. So the idea is to get in there before that happens.
Ideal, just preventative care, isn't it?
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm just thinking as well. I know you're not. Your main area isn't technology, but I'm just thinking in my head while you're talking about virtual reality and balance and mobility. Have you been involved in anything like that?
I haven't really. And I suppose, I said to you very early on, I'd like to take quite a Buddhist approach to therapy, rehab, if you like. It's all about actual reality as far as I'm concerned. So being very mindful of the way things actually are. And so me and virtual reality.
Okay. We'll leave that to someone else.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I think we've covered lots there. There's lots and lots of good tips for clinicians in there around therapeutic interventions and the things that we perhaps don't think about. Mindfulness, relaxation, communication skills, involving the carers, all really, really useful. Is there anything else that you are working on that we haven't covered, or any other messages that you'd like to talk about?
I suspect I've banged on very well about the couple of things that really excite me. So slow down and concentrate is essential for all people with any kind of long-term condition. Don't fight it, live with it. Don't feel you have to beat it up and win. You don't, you cope. Think about relaxation as much as you think about being active, and leisure is a really important consideration. Think about leisure, because anything that sits you down and is something you enjoy doing, we know there's tons of evidence to say that it's good for your physical health and your mental health, and for your perceived physical and mental health, which actually might be more important than your actual. So think about just doing something you enjoy doing for half an hour a day. The benefits are huge and will bring you relaxation as well, which may facilitate movement. Concentrate on your fatigue. Yeah, no, that's about it. Slow fatigue. You can see what my day's like.
Yeah,
slow, fatigue.
It's brilliant. Oh, brilliant. I really like your approach, and I like this message. I think it's really useful. It's definitely something that we don't pay enough attention to, I believe. So I think people will be really interested to hear you talk about it all. Now, Emma, is there anywhere we can find out about you online? Do you have?
Oh, no, I'm a bit old-fashioned. So apart from looking me up at the university, there is only one Emma Stack at the University of Southampton, as far as I know. So you'll find me there. I'm very bad. I don't have anything like a personal website, and I don't have a Twitter feed or anything. So at the moment, that's the way to get hold of me. But watch this space.
All right, perfect. So I did see your page on the University of Southampton, and all your research is listed on there as well, so we can find out more about your work and what you've been doing. So unless there's anything else you'd like to say to everyone, I think that's been a really useful conversation.
Excellent. No, that's great. And if there's a bunch of physios who are listening to this interview, you know where I am. Contact me if I can be of any help whatsoever. But I'm very pro physio, even though I seem to have spent most of the last, half an hour saying do less, be less active, and calm down. No. Exercise is important, but so is rest. For physios too.
Yeah, good. Yeah, exactly. Thanks very much, Emma. Great to talk to you today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.